Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar video. This is going to be my next Korra fan commentary track, and this one's going to be for Book 3 Change Episode 13, Venom of the Red Lotus. Continue to send in suggestions for other episodes from Avatar and Korra that I should do as part of this commentary track series. But yeah, let's get into the instructions on how to sync up your copy of the episode with this commentary track. So when I finish this introduction to the video, I'm going to stop speaking. There'll be about a 10-second pause with no audio, and then when I start speaking again after that pause, that's when I'm going to hit play. It's when you should hit play, and we should be synced up at that point. So I'm going to stop speaking now as part of the intro. There'll be a pause. Hit play when I start speaking again after the pause. Okay, so here we are with K313 Venom of the Red Lotus. I think this is going to be a little bit controversial, especially if you haven't seen some of my other videos discussing Book 3, but this is not one of my favorite episodes. I don't rate this one particularly highly. I don't hate this episode or even I suppose dislike it really all that much. I just don't think it's like this top tier episode of Korra. I think there's so many episodes that are better than this. And it links into, I think, the fact that why I consider Book 3 to be the weakest book of Korra. And it comes down to the fact that for me, the Korra books are very much defined by their villains. The villains really are the plot point. And I think the villains in Book 3 are their weakest because they're the least developed by far. They're a powerful physical threat, but character-wise, they're paper thin. In that Zahir is very much just this one-note character who just keeps saying, freedom, I don't like world leaders, just over and over again, and that's all he's about. And Korra just fundamentally doesn't agree with him. And that's all the dynamic really is. He just wants to kill her because she's the Avatar and he views her as a world leader. And that's it. I felt they were setting up something bigger with the idea of why do they want to capture her but, keep her alive? But it feels a little bit simplistic to just, end the Avatar cycle. That would have been better if you had directly set that up a little bit more. You had him talking about wanting to do that for a while. But he's talking about balance and natural order and then wanting to literally sort of kill the spirit of balance and the Avatar who represents balance, and it's just I get he's a villain, but this is so hard to get behind. And I think that's the other problem with the Red Lotus is just of all the philosophies of all of the villains, I think this is definitely the most difficult one to be in any way I say where he's coming from. Because he literally is just I'm going to kill all the world leaders because I don't like them. I'm not going to explain why I have a personal issue with world leaders, nor is Ghazan, Minghua, or Pali. We just don't like them because our organization says we don't like them. Maybe. So I think the Red Lotus itself is fairly underdeveloped as well. Because the White Lotus were in it quite heavily at the start. Then they're just gone, so you don't even do much with the Red Lotus, White Lotus dynamic. But yeah, here we go. Korra getting poisoned here. This is good in that it sets up, of course, the really strong Book 4 stuff with Korra and her recovery. I think they lean too much down the direction of it just being this torturous experience for Korra. I get you had to do this to have Book 4 be as strong as it is, but I think it does sacrifice the final kind of hero-villain fight completely for what they do here. They kind of hit the same point over and over again, I think a little bit too hard in this episode. And this is where I think the fact that Korra didn't really have much of a character arc here, and it more has to just be she made this great sacrifice for the Airbenders, and that's the main dynamic that you're going for. All of the development is Book 1, 2, and 4, not so much here. But yeah, Kai on Lefty is pretty fun. And yeah, Tenzin injured, of course, after his big battle with the Red Lotus. He's out of action completely. Because they had that cutaway scene at the end of, I think it was the Ultimatum, where you're oh my god, are they killing Tenzin here? Because they just started basically beating him down. as we kind of cut off screen. But yeah, of course, struggling to not go into the Avatar state, but it's too much, pretty much. This hallucination is fairly well done in that, like, this helps to highlight at this moment that this is going to be an ongoing traumatic experience for Korra. I wish they had referenced the other villains a little bit more in book 4, rather than focusing just on Zahir, really, as like being the main sort of culprit behind what happened to her, and not. But they do just about enough, I think, with like Toph helping Korra to realize like she can learn from her past villains and so on. But yeah. It's one of those things with like the Red Lotus, White Lotus. You almost forget that, oh yeah, there are just these random Red Lotus goons as well. There's, as much as we're critical of the White Lotus in Korra for like not really being as memorable as it was in Avatar, the Red Lotus also has like random members that don't seem particularly like insightful as characters. Which again just highlights that I wish you would develop both organizations better, rather than just have the White Lotus just leave the series mysteriously after a certain point and kind of still not really confirm Zuko as a member, maybe. But yeah, clever tactics here is like Jinora is like leading the group here. But yeah, that guy just gets absolutely wrecked by Lin's rock. And yeah, he's no match for this group. Some cool non-bender action from Asami. And yeah, just quick takedown. They were nothing impressive. And this is the organization that's better than the White Lotus, apparently. But yeah, everyone is freed. A lot of injured characters. And yeah, the big reunion here. Kai is alive because she saw him get like blown out of the sky. She thought he was dead. But it's a really nice reunion moment here. Kind of real setup for their relationship. You know they're going to get together eventually. I wish the comics focused in a little bit more on that, because it is such a nice dynamic. They just really need to announce the next Korra comic. And yeah, Jinora already knows where she is. So here we go. It's going to be too much for Korra to hold back at this point. And yeah, this is the Red Lotus hyper underestimating the power of the Avatar state. And this just highlights here that the Avatar state, like what powers the bending, is an energy source that is just so much more powerful than just the chi within a person's body. That as much as a lava bender can do some very powerful moves, Korra can just do basic bending attacks empowered so much because she's the Avatar that it just completely counters what he can do. Which speaks to the fact that, you know, when you really want to fight the Avatar state, you have to have something like a Sozin's Comet firebending and be a firebending master like Ozai was. Or you have to weaken the Avatar with a poison like this. But this starts what I feel is the very weak part of this fight. The strong part of this action set piece at the end is the brothers versus Minghua and Ghazan. Their one-on-one fights and then like two-on-one fight I think are much better than Korra Zahir. I don't think this fight is like terrible, but it's a little bit repetitive. I don't think we really get to see the Avatar state used at its best. And I think that's purposeful as well because of the poison, but it does take away overall from what the fight actually is, because most of it is just that. Like, Zahir's not doing anything fancy, just airbending and flying around and dodging, and then throwing Korra into a wall. And then, because Korra is with the poison, she's not doing anything particularly impressive either. So it ends up being just this very low-key fight scene, I think, given that it's the main hero versus villain fight of this book. It's a fight that it's an episode I remember more for the other fights, and then this more for just like some important plot beats more than anything. It's not that it's all bad. There are some decent sequences in it, but it's very repetitive. Like, it doesn't need the amount of screen time that I think it gets, given what plot you're going for. I would have much preferred to see an extended fight between Gazan and Bolin, or Minghua and Mako, than anything else. I like the little bit of hand-to-hand combat included there, that Bolin is a match for Gazan, just earth to earth. But Gazan is a master lava bender, but this time Bolin is too. Not a master, but he has lava bending. And yeah, Gazan is kind of like, okay, let's see what he can do. Someone who's kind of a match for me. Let's see how this goes. He's kind of excited to fight another lava bender. It's a great reveal moment for Bolin getting that ability. It's still crazy to believe that, like, one of the few lava benders in the entire series has such an unusual arc right now in the comics, where, like, he doesn't know what to do with his life, and he's like one of the most powerful benders in the series. But yeah, it's a little bit just, you know, charge in full power, get smashed into wall, rinse and repeat. And look, I get they're trying to hit that point of Korra getting sort of like really beaten up here, really injured, suffering from the poison. It's meant to be this sort of torturous exploration of like what Korra is going through. I just think they overdo it and don't really deliver us any like particularly amazing action. This is where like the flying ability like is cool, because it's great to find out about this secret ability for airbenders, but it doesn't make for the best like actual choreography in fights. You know, you see the weakness of like, if every book ended with a big two flying characters just doing this big mega fight, it'd get boring over time, because it'd just be the same big moves done over and over again, and the same just like dodging via flight. Whereas you do at times just want a, you know, keep it on the ground for the most part, maybe just jump around a little bit rather than flying around. And yeah, like I like the setup for the flight ability, in that like it highlights the idea of like, this is when you take that like guru idea of like taking your attachments away to the absolute max of like just utterly not being attached to anything on the world, so you can actually fly. But it also highlights the sort of loneliness of this. He's on his own out here, and we'll see when he's defeated ultimately, it's at a point at which the entire rest of his team has been killed. That he has this ability because he's kind of let go of everything. He's utterly detached, but there's no one to help him. And yeah, you see here, Mako has the advantage even just in the sort of standard part of the fight. He'd taken away all of her water, highlighting his skill level. That I always remember with Mako, what Amon said about him in the finale of book 1. He is a very talented bender, and we see that on display here. Minghua was able to defeat Kaya, and Mako learned from the previous sort of loss back in the stakeout, and gets the advantage here by doing what he didn't do the previous time, which was use lightning, which is perfect against Minghua, since her water has to be attached to her body. Now, it's unclear if Mako kills Minghua directly there, or if what kills Minghua is Gazan bringing the place down. I'm assuming it's more of Gazan bringing the place down, and he's just completely KO'd her there, is what Mako's done. But yeah, Bolin is at a slight disadvantage in the lava bending fight, but Mako comes in to help out. And just, here's where you see maybe Gazan's weakness as a bender. His defenses maybe aren't as good as his offense, and that when he is on the back foot, he struggles to get back on the front foot. He relies very much on just quick, really heavy destructive power, and when he can't do that, he's maybe quick to give up or do the big move. And yeah, like, it's sort of meaningful in the idea of like, he doesn't want to go back to prison. It links into the whole idea of freedom. But because he was in prison, because he was captured as part of a previous Red Lotus incident, you kind of still are asking the question of like, what happened in his past to make him part of the group and care so much about freedom in the first place. And yeah, This to me is just a very representative of the whole fight. He just flies past her, sends her flying into a mountain. She falls down. He does the same thing again. In that, like, would it not be more impactful with Korra helpless to just do it once, but emphasize that, like, she's getting injured as she falls down a mountain? It borderline feels like a little bit too comical in a way to have her fall down multiple cliffs and be just bashed into walls multiple times and still be able to, like, do anything. I just think it's a little bit ill thought out, this fight. Like, of course, the soaking air out of the lungs technique is fairly cool. Obviously, we saw it before Zahir with Afiko, but yeah, it's still a cool ability. But I think the Red Lotus, I think, are too hyped up on the basis of stuff like that, of like they're willing to kill people, but we character-wise don't really know them that much. But yeah, Team Airbender Tornado, led by Jinora. This is her big thing. This is kind of really what earns her those tattoos, is really like acting on her own here and showing herself to be a leader within the new Air Nation. And again, Zahir on his own trying to take out the Avatar, but no one to help him. His power, which he got by leaving everyone else behind, is no match for the power of the whole nation. That here's an airbender on his own versus the airbenders together. He tries to escape on his own, but Korra's last moment here grabs him with the chain, slams him into the ground. Massive impact here. And that's the defeat of Zahir. I think this is where more of the impact comes in, of just the after the fight. Zahir is defeated, they have him locked down basically. But it's this, that the result is that even in the Avatar state, the glow is still on, she still basically can't move. That highlights how injured she is with the poison, plus physically from the fight. I really like that the glow is on as she reaches out. That the Avatar state is really what's kind of keeping her going in a way. That if it kind of goes off, if it goes off too soon, she might be gone. I don't like that they characterize Zahir to go kind of crazy with his defeat. It, to me, contradicts every other scene with Zahir in the series. That, like, he doesn't feel like the character who would do that. So it feels a little bit too comedy villain to have him go down that path, as we'll see with what Bolin does to him in a second. But yeah, Sue takes the metal out, most of it, as we find out. I loved how it was sort of a theory that some people had at the time, that like, oh, is Sue a villain? Maybe she's purposely kept some of it in there for something. But I never really bought into it. But it was definitely a theory that was out there. But yeah, all the poison, except a little bit, out. And she's still alive, but who knows what the full extent of her injuries are. And yeah, it's also the reveal that, like, Korra finds out Tonraq is alive, that she was saved by Kuvira. And yeah, here he is ranting and raving again. Revolution, chaos. And yeah, like, that is just, to me, terrible writing. Bolin literally puts a sock in Zahir's mouth to cover up what he's saying, because even the writers are basically admitting there what he's saying is stupid. And I think that's the only way to really view that scene. It's just like that. Yeah, what the villain was talking about was really over the top. Bolin just do that. I hate that they do that. Thankfully, Zahir is much better in the next scene. I think the book 4 Zahir scene is like his best scene. But why they have to salvage so much from this ending for him. And obviously Korra in the wheelchair there. Very kind of powerful imagery. I don't so much view this as being a Korrasami scene, in that I think you could replace this with like Senna, like Sue, Opal, Jinora, even Mako and Bolin. Like, I think you would have had a very similar scene here, in that the aim of this scene is not to be romantic. The aim of this scene is to highlight what Korra is going through. And so I think to in any way add romantic stuff into that is wrong. In the same way that, like, with the desert, which I did not that many commentaries ago, I wouldn't view the scene at the end between Katara and Aang as being a romantic scene. It is an aspect of the dynamic between the two characters, but it's not part of their romantic development. The romantic development should come in episodes like Fortune Teller, Cave of Two Lovers, where the main thing you take away from the dynamic, how those two characters are in that scene, is it's a romantic scene. And I think that's what they don't really do with Korrasami during the course of the series, is just have any scenes that are just like really clearly romantic. That's the only way to interpret them. And I think outside of the blush in episode 7 of book 4, you don't get many of them. I think that's why the comics are so important in terms of developing the Korrasami relationship, because they finally did that by having them go on effectively a date on their spirit world vacation together and have scenes that are clearly romantic between the two. Like, you can have subtle romantic scenes, but I don't think they do it, many of them, with Korra and Asami. Like I said, the blush is one of them. But yeah, Raiko's words here give Tenzin the idea of maybe this is something the new Air Nation can do. And he realizes Raiko, after has been so terrible to Korra all this time, that like, oh, we actually will need her. Yeah, big moment. He was the last, and now his own daughter is going to become the next Master Airbender. Specifically, the youngest ever Master Airbender. And yeah, Jinora, he highlights her leadership in this, but also the sacrifice that Korra made in all of this as well. That her actions brought it back with her decisions back in book 2. It's a great speech, definitely. But, you know, she made that sacrifice, but you can tell, like, there's so much of it. Like, she hates that she's in this position. This is so against the way we usually can view Korra. She's always this physical character, full of energy, and here she is, like, quiet in the wheelchair, sad. And it's a very strong, like, emotional beat to end the book on, is to just Korra in the wheelchair, struggling to, you know, kind of see anything except just the recovery ahead of her. But it's a great moment for Jinora, like, fantastic character development over the course of book 2 and this book especially. And there we go, the arrow on the head, also on the arms. It's a fantastic moment. It's like an airbender ceremony actually happening. Who would have thought it after all this time? It's great to finally see what one of these ceremonies is like. And like, Jinora gets this huge moment at the end of the book. It's just kind of unfortunate she, again, was sort of more in the background a bit in book 4. I wish they'd used her a bit more, given that moments like this at the end felt like you were really transitioning the character into being like borderline this other member of Team Avatar, like younger, but like she's now a master as well. So but you know, in the comics, Jinora is definitely a character we want to see some focus on, given that spirit stuff is going to be important going forward. But yeah, strong ending of the episode. But yeah, like I said, I think the main thing that that prevents me from ever placing this episode too highly is just that it's a final fight between the kind of main character and the villain, where it's a pretty weird dynamic. I don't like the dynamic of basically just like Korra as like an individual isn't kind of almost involved in the fight, because it's just the Avatar state versus Zahir, and it's kind of just Zahir beating Korra up while she's under this defense mechanism thing that's struggling to keep her alive. And there's an element of like that kind of works later on in book 4 of the fact that it was not personal between the two of them, almost that like it's worse that Zahir literally just viewed her as the Avatar and didn't care at all about the person that Korra was, just that she is the Avatar, so I'm going to try and kill you. But I don't think they really present that all that well here, and it's just Korra gets beaten up, and she's poisoned, and she gets beaten up again, and tossed into a mountain, and tossed into this mountain. Oh look, she tries to counterattack, but Zahir just literally flies out of the way, and that's it. It doesn't present Zahir as being particularly powerful, or anything. It's just this situation. And like I said, I never really connected too hard on the idea of like, oh, I'm gonna end the Avatar cycle here, because it's like, I get technically you view the Avatar as a world leader, and it seems clear that you're never going to turn her, but like, you want to just kill her for the sake of it anyway. Okay, even though she's technically not really a world leader, it's like, again, what is your philosophy here? As evidenced by the fact that Bolin just sticks a sock in his mouth, because he's just spouting nonsense, basically, which is most of the way I kind of interpret a lot of Zahir's kind of, and the Red Lotus philosophy, is that, like Korra said in the stakeout, the last time she met Zahir, really, it was just sort of philosophical mumbo-jumbo. That his, like, Book 4 basically reveals that his whole ideal was sort of ill thought out, that chaos has, he seemingly had some view of chaos being helpful in the world, changing things, but not that it ultimately would lead to like Kuvira. And I think just the fact that that's exactly what happens, of like, it doesn't help the people be more free, it causes more issues. And it just doubles down on the fact that, like, I think the Red Lotus philosophy is the most difficult one to get behind. And then, like, as strong as some of the fights are, like Mako versus Minghua, Bolin versus Ghazan, how much more impactful would those fights be if we had characterized them, if we knew who Ghazan was as a person, knew who Minghua as a person is? Their deaths would actually sort of mean something. And as it is right now, it's just like, okay, Mako killed someone, and you do very much view it as just Mako won the fight, and because they weren't characterized, you're okay with that, when it should be a bigger thing of like, Mako killed someone, like, you know, Ghazan killed himself, and potentially Minghua as well. And I think that's unfortunate, of like, you kind of touched on the idea of freedom. Freedom's meant to be the theme, but you never explored with, especially Minghua and Ghazan, what freedom meant to them. Because it's, to me, it is not enough to base their love of freedom on the fact that they were imprisoned at the start of this book, because they were imprisoned because of their actions previously as part of the Red Lotus. So they have to have a sense of freedom before that, and I don't think any of that's really informed. The same with Zahir. While the little bit of backstory back in episode 9 does reveal that, Zahir met Unalaq to join the Red Lotus, it's more of a backstory for Unalaq than it is Zahir. It still doesn't inform us about Zahir, who he is, like who he was prior to the airbending and all that sort of stuff. And apart from like the Nickelodeon website prior to this book revealing that, like, oh, he's like a warrior poet, and literally just those two words, it not going any more in depth in it, and just like, okay, Guru Lahima, okay, it needs to be explored more. The Red Lotus is an organization, the White Lotus is an organization, all of the Red Lotus members as characters, and that's what they need to do in the comics. The Avatar comics need to explore Zhai Bao as a character, given that he should be pretty much coming up at any point now in the comics. That has to happen at some point soon. You need to characterize Zahir, give him a backstory, Pali a backstory, show her backstory, don't have it just be told to us. Because I think that's probably the biggest thing that this book does that I think is a problem, is that it relies very heavily on telling us stuff about the characters, and even then not that much, instead of showing us any of it. Like, okay, Pali and the whole warlord story with Zahir is interesting, but show us what that means. Do you literally mean a warlord of a fire island if you connect it to other references to the term warlord in the lore? Because I don't get enough from what you said there. And while it does help to explain why Pali cares about freedom, you still, it would have been better to show it, to give more of an insight into her character, to do a little bit more. And then I think it's most heavily emphasized with Ghazan, in that, like, some of the only details we ever learn about his character is Bolin says like 3 things about him, and Ghazan says 2 of those things are correct. What is it? He says, you were raised by an older sister, you like grew a mustache at a very young age, and something else. I can't remember what the other one was. And he just says, yeah, 2 of them are correct, and you're just left to assume that it's the raised by an older sister, and the one that's not the mustache, that's the actual things about him. But because there's no extra information given, it's just like, okay, Gazan had a sister. You're not going to tell us about what happened to her, why she's not around. Does that relate to why we should care about like his sense of freedom and how he views things? Similarly, like Minghua, she doesn't have any arms. Why? Like, I think Brian, I think, had to explain to us after the show that no, she was born without arms. She didn't lose them in an accident. Tell us about that in the show. Link that into her caring about freedom. Why she refused bending training, even though she was a bender, because she had no arms. Those type of things. Because she's the Water Tribe member of the group. Did she meet Unalaq? At what point did she come in as part of the group? All these kind of aspects are just like not there. And as a group of four, it's incredible how underdeveloped the dynamics between the four of them really is. The other thing that Bolin said about Gazan was that you and Minghua have like an unspoken like attraction between the two of you, which I guess is meant to be the case. But again, they don't really touch on it after that point, really. So it's just a lot of that stuff. That's the way I view book 3. It's just that it's underdeveloped. That's the word. About so many of the plots. When it comes to the main like Red Lotus plot point, in contrast to the very strong plot point of the Return of the Airbenders, the introduction of characters like, Kai, Jinora getting a big focus, Boomy getting his airbending, Tenzin's arc this book, that's all very strong, as is the sort of like Zhao Fu plot with like the introduction of Su and the dynamic with Lin and that backstory. The side plots in this book are very well done. Unfortunately, I don't think the same can be said of the main plot, and that's why I've always viewed book 3 as being the weakest book, and that's why I've always viewed the Red Lotus as being the weakest villains. Just because I struggle with the idea of like Avatar's strength, which is always characters to me, character development, character focus, and how much you care about the characters, how little is done with them. But that's the end of the commentary. Continue to suggest episodes for me to do for both Avatar and Korra as part of this commentary track series. But in the comments let me know what your thoughts are on this episode. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.